All right, so one of the things we're doing with the Civil War is trying to, when we can, compare it back to the American Revolution. And I don't have a whole lot to tell you about the economic responsibilities of women in the Civil War, which is why I thought it'd be easier just to make a quick little video. This is where you most see the similarities between the Civil War and the American Revolution. Remember, with the American Revolution, we saw how when men would go off to war, women were home with the farm, and initially they'd write questions like, what do I do? What do I do with your pigs? What do I do with your corn? What do I do with your cows? But then as the war continued, they stopped asking questions and they just started saying, this is what I did with the pigs. This is what I did with the cows. This is what I did with the corn. Except now they stopped saying yours and started saying ours, or sometimes even mine. So that same thing's going to happen in the Civil War. One thing that's a little different, there's a great clip from the film Cold Mountain. It's literally like, I don't even think 2 minutes long, but I couldn't find it on YouTube for you. It's the book's actually really good, Cold Mountain, and the film, surprisingly, because films don't always do a good job of translating books, this one actually is a pretty good translation. There's this great clip in the film Cold Mountain that shows one of the things that's maybe a little bit different for women managing farms at home during the Civil War, and that's that they now have an education. And so for some of them, they're surprised at how unprepared they are. And there's this really great clip in that film that I usually show in class where the two women are building the fence, and one of the women, her name's Ada. She's played by Renee Zellweger. She actually won an Oscar for her role. She's not as educated. She's kind of a lower class woman. Whereas Ada, played by Nicole Kidman, she's that upper class woman who's definitely had an education. And they're building the fence, and Ada's asking the more educated woman, well, what about this? What about that? And finally she says, you can ask me just about anything you want, but I basically won't know the answer. I could tell you about farming in Latin, but I couldn't actually grow anything. I could tell you about the principal rivers in French in Europe, but I couldn't tell you about the stream, down the way. I can cross stitch, but I can't darn. And then my favorite line is like, Lord knows I can lace a corset, Lord knows. And then the character says, well, why? And Ada answers, you can ask that just about anything about me. If a thing was purposeful, if a thing had a purpose, it was considered not proper. And so that's when, and again, the education that she's reflecting kind of seems like that long list of things that we saw Catherine Beecher giving her students, but not any detailed explanation of things, just a little bit of everything. And so that's one thing that's a little different in the Civil War, is women had expected maybe to be more prepared because they had an education, but they realized that their education is falling short. And so what we'll see after the Civil War is women are going to start getting access to college. About 10 to 15 years after the war, they'll start getting access to college. And then the other thing that's a little different about the Civil War is women's possibilities for labor. We're going to see with the medical field, the government will realize, why are we having men be nurses when we can have women be nurses? And a similar thing will happen with office work, is in the North, they'll realize, well, instead of having men serve in some office positions, we could hire women to be in those positions. Now, most women are going to lose these jobs after the war, but it gives the idea of the possibility of women working in an office. And so when the typewriter is invented, not too long after the war, or at least when the typewriter is more readily available, not long after the war, this will provide an opportunity for some women to enter the workforce, because there'll be that memory of women working in offices during the Civil War. All right, if you have any questions, you can put those in the discussion board at the end of, or within this module. Take care.